My son's wedding was days away when I discovered his fiancée, Serafina, was already married, had ruined her first husband, and driven him to suicide. She was isolating him, just like the last one. I kept my face neutral, but my heart was screaming. I knew then I had to protect my son, no matter the cost. This is my story. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The scent of lavender and old lace hung in the air of my sewing room as I meticulously ironed the final pleats on the tablecloths for the rehearsal dinner. My fingers, accustomed to a lifetime of homemaking, moved with a practiced grace, yet my mind was a whirlwind of anticipation. In 2 short days, my son, Ethan, would marry Serafina. 64 years of life had taught me a thing or two about navigating emotional currents, and while a part of me thrilled at the prospect of Ethan's happiness, another, more subtle current of unease had been swirling beneath the surface for months. Still, I pushed it down. This was a joyous occasion, a new chapter. My old rotary phone, a relic I clung to despite Ethan's pleas for a smartphone upgrade, chirped from its cradle on the wall. The caller ID glowed, hidden number. Usually, I let such calls go to voicemail, assuming telemarketers, but a strange impulse made me answer. Perhaps it was the nervous energy of the impending wedding, or simply a deviation from my usual routine. Hello? My voice, steady as ever, belied the slight tremor that had just coursed through me. A woman's voice, raspy and urgent, replied, "Is this Eleanor Vance?" "It is," I confirmed, my brow furrowing. Who was this? And how did she know my name? "Don't go to the wedding, Mrs. Vance," the caller said, each word a cold, hard pebble dropped into a quiet pool. "Your daughter-in-law planned." My breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" "My name is Lila Sterling, and your future daughter-in-law, Serafina, her real name is Clara Maeve. She's my brother, Arthur's wife. They've been married for 3 years. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Serafina? Married? My mind reeled, trying to process the impossibility of it. That's absurd. You must have the wrong person. I wish I did. Lila's voice held a note of profound weariness, tinged with a bitterness that cut deep. Clara Maeve, or Serafina, as she now calls herself, systematically cleaned out my brother, left him financially ruined, and disappeared. She's doing the same thing to your son, Ethan. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Memories, previously dismissed as mere motherly overprotectiveness, flooded my mind. Ethan, my strong, independent Ethan, had changed since Serafina entered his life. He was more distant, less communicative, and conversations about family had become increasingly strained. Serafina had a subtle way of monopolizing his time, his attention, often making excuses for why he couldn't attend family dinners or weekend visits. She was never overtly hostile, just possessive, like a vine slowly strangling a tree. My suspicions had been a quiet hum. Now they roared. Bigamy is hard to prove. Mrs. Vance, Lila continued, as if reading my thoughts. Especially with someone as careful as Clara. She leaves no paper trail. But I have proof. Solid proof. Her words were chillingly confident, and my initial disbelief began to erode, replaced by a growing dread. If this was true, what kind of monster had captivated my son? Then came the revelation that turned my blood to ice. My brother, Arthur. He took his own life 6 months after Clara Maeve disappeared. He couldn't cope with the debt, the humiliation. She took everything from him, Eleanor. His dignity, his future, his very will to live. A silent scream echoed in my head. Suicide. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just about money or deceit. This was about a life, brutally extinguished. My hands, still clutching the phone, trembled violently. "I know this is a lot to take in," Lila said, her voice softening slightly, though the underlying urgency remained. "But you have to believe me. And you have to act. I need to meet you. Tomorrow night. Riverside Park. By the old oak tree. At exactly 10 p.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, especially not Serafina. You can't let her suspect anything. But why me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Because you're his mother. You're the only one who can stop her. And I want justice for Arthur. The line went dead, leaving me in the silence of my sewing room, the lingering scent of lavender now feeling morbidly out of place. My carefully pressed tablecloths lay in a neat pile, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting within me. I spent the next hour replaying every interaction with Serafina since Ethan had introduced her a year and a half ago. She had been charming, almost disarmingly so. Her background, however, had always been vague. She'd mentioned a move from the Midwest and talked about a career in consulting, but never specific companies or locations. I'd attributed it to her being private, perhaps modest. Now, it screamed evasion. Her quick integration into Ethan's life, her seemingly effortless ability to charm his friends and colleagues, even my own reluctant acceptance, it all took on a sinister hue. Her perfect smile, her sparkling eyes, the way she would laugh at Ethan's jokes just a beat too long. It had all felt a little too rehearsed, a little too polished. At the time, I'd simply thought her unusually poised. Now, it felt like an act, a meticulously crafted performance. My head throbbed. The thought of confronting Ethan, of breaking his heart with such a monstrous accusation, was unbearable. But the alternative, letting him walk blindly into a trap that could destroy him, as it had destroyed Arthur Sterling, was unthinkable. My son, my brilliant, kind-hearted Ethan, deserved so much more than to be another victim in this woman's cruel game. Sleep refused to come that night. Every rustle of leaves outside, every creak of the old house, seemed to amplify the whispers of doubt and fear. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of Serafina's carefully constructed facade. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had to uncover the truth. I had to protect my son, no matter the personal cost, no matter how painful the journey. This was not just a wedding anymore, it was a battle, and I was going to fight it. The morning after Lila Sterling's chilling call dawned with a deceptive tranquility. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. But inside me, a storm raged. I moved through my routine like a puppet on strings, making coffee, watering my small herb garden, all while a frantic internal monologue screamed about a wedding just one day away. Every breath felt shallow, every tick of the clock a hammer blow. I had to appear normal, Lila had insisted, and that instruction was a lead weight in my gut. How could I feign normalcy when my son's future, perhaps his very life, hung by a thread? As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I braced myself, forcing a cheerful tone. "Morning, sweetie. Everything all right?" "Morning, Mom," he replied, but his voice sounded oddly strained, a subtle tension I immediately picked up on. "Yeah, just busy. Called to confirm the rehearsal dinner details for tonight. 6 o'clock at the Oak Room. Right?" "That's right, darling. Everything's arranged. Are you okay? You sound a little preoccupied." I longed to ask him about his finances, about anything that might confirm Lila's terrible claims. But Lila's warning echoed in my ears. Don't let her suspect anything. Even a mother's innocent probing might trigger an alarm. I bit my tongue, the words dying unspoken. "Just last-minute jitters, I guess," Ethan said with a forced chuckle that didn't quite reach his eyes, or so I imagined. "Listen, Mom, I need a favor. Serafina's aunt, Clara Maeve Sterling, she flew in from Nashville late last night, and her dress for the rehearsal dinner is still at the dry cleaners. Serafina is at the salon, and I'm tied up with the caterers. Could you possibly pick it up for us? It's the one on Main Street, Sparkle Cleaners." My heart slammed against my ribs. Clara Maeve Sterling. The name Lila had given me, the real name of Serafina. My mind raced. Serafina's aunt? I managed, my voice thankfully steady. "Of course, dear. What's the name on the order?" "It should be under Sterling. Clara Maeve Sterling," Ethan confirmed, oblivious to the seismic shift he had just caused in my world. "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver." We exchanged a few more pleasantries, but my mind was already a blur of adrenaline and dread. The moment I hung up, I felt a visceral confirmation. This wasn't some random coincidence. This was it, the first tangible thread in the tapestry of deceit Lila Sterling had described. I grabbed my keys, the small, seemingly mundane task of picking up a dress suddenly imbued with immense significance. The short drive to Sparkle Cleaners was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. When I pulled into the parking lot, I didn't immediately go in. Instead, I sat there, engine idling, trying to compose myself. My blood felt like ice. Clara Maeve Sterling. This aunt had the exact name Lila claimed was Serafina's real identity. Ethan had mentioned her aunt's name so casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for an aunt to share the same full name as her niece's supposed real identity. It was too flimsy, too convenient. My son, usually so astute, was blind to it. Or perhaps, worse, he had been deliberately conditioned not to question. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the car door and walked into the clean, sterile-smelling dry cleaner. The young woman behind the counter greeted me with a polite smile. "I'm here to pick up a dress for Clara Maeve Sterling," I stated, the name feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. She typed it into her system, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ah, yes. One gown. Just a moment." She disappeared into the labyrinth of hanging garments, returning quickly with a shimmering, floor-length emerald green dress. "That'll be all set, Mrs. Vance," she said, handing me the garment bag. The payment was already processed. "May I see the receipt?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the urgency I felt. "Just for my records, you know. For the wedding expenses," she nodded cheerfully, printing a duplicate. My eyes scanned the paper, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The date the order was placed leaped out at me. 6 months ago. 6 months ago. The wedding plans had only truly begun to solidify about 4 months ago. Serafina's aunt had supposedly just flew in from Nashville, but her dress had been dropped off here half a year ago, long before any wedding preparations would have necessitated a rehearsal dinner outfit for an out-of-town relative. Then, the final, undeniable proof. Under payment method, it clearly stated, Visa ending 1,234. Cardholder, Clara Maeve Sterling. Not a cash payment from a new arrival, but a card, under the very name Lila Sterling had given me, a card that had been in use for months. This wasn't Serafina's aunt. This was Serafina. A cold wave of certainty washed over me, displacing the last vestiges of doubt. Lila was telling the truth. My son was about to marry a woman who was already married, a woman who had, according to Lila, driven her first husband to suicide. The thought was sickening. I thanked the young woman, my mind reeling, the emerald dress a garish symbol of deceit. Instead of going straight home, I found myself driving towards Ethan's house, a spare key always kept under a potted plant for emergencies. This certainly qualified. My hands still trembled slightly as I unlocked the door. The house, once a reflection of Ethan's neat, comfortable bachelorhood, now bore Serafina's indelible mark. Expensive, elaborate pieces of furniture I'd never seen before adorned the living room. Ornate vases, large, framed abstract art, and lush fabrics had replaced Ethan's more practical, minimalist decor. Her designer handbags were casually tossed on an antique chair, and a pair of delicate, diamond-studded earrings glinted on the console table. I walked through the house, each new item a fresh wound. These were not Ethan's tastes, nor, I suspected, within his normal budget. Serafina's presence was everywhere, not just in the sheer volume of her belongings, but in their opulent nature. They spoke of a lifestyle far beyond what I knew Ethan's income could comfortably support. It was a clear pattern, a subtle but relentless takeover. Lila had said Serafina had cleaned out her brother. Was this the early stage of history repeating itself? My resolve solidified. I wouldn't let that happen to my son. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I moved deeper into Ethan's house. The opulent decor, so carefully placed by Serafina, felt less like an aesthetic choice and more like a territorial claim. My instinct, sharpened by years of motherly concern, urged me to search. Where would a woman with something to hide keep her secrets? Not openly, not casually. My gaze fell upon the guest bedroom, a room Ethan rarely used, but one Serafina had recently tidied up for visiting relatives. It was too perfect, too impersonal, a deliberate blank slate. I walked in, my steps muffled by the thick carpet, and began my search. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I would recognize it when I saw it. The closet held neatly folded towels and extra linens. The dresser drawers were empty. Then, my eyes landed on the nightstand beside the bed. It was a sturdy, old-fashioned piece Ethan had inherited, with a shallow, almost hidden drawer at the very bottom. It wasn't obvious. Tucked away beneath the main drawers. With trembling fingers, I pulled it open. Inside, nestled among a few forgotten receipts and a dried flower, was a thick manila folder. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. I pulled it out, my hands clammy. The label, scrawled in an elegant, looping hand, simply read, "Important." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the contents, each document a fresh wave of nausea. The first item was a marriage certificate. It stated, unequivocally, that Clara Maeve Sterling and Arthur Sterling had been united in marriage 3 years ago in Georgia. My worst fears materialized on that official document, stark and undeniable. Serafina, my son's fiancée, was indeed Clara Maeve Sterling. Tucked behind the certificate were photographs. Several candid shots of Serafina, but with lighter, almost blonde hair, laughing, her arm around a man who looked worn even in the photo. Arthur Sterling, I presumed. Despite the different hair color, there was no doubt it was Serafina. Her eyes, her smile, the distinct curve of her jaw. It was her. The deception was breathtaking in its audacity. My gaze moved to the next set of papers. Bank statements. A sickening pattern emerged. For months, large sums, hundreds of thousands of dollars, had been systematically transferred from Arthur Sterling's accounts to an account solely in Clara Maeve Sterling's name. It was a methodical, draining, a financial hemorrhage. Then, property deeds. Arthur Sterling's house, his small local business, both had been transferred into Clara Maeve Sterling's sole ownership just weeks before their official separation papers were filed. She hadn't just taken his money. She had taken his very foundations, his future, leaving him utterly destitute. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of someone else's tragedy. And then I found it. The document that confirmed Lila Sterling's most horrifying claim, Arthur Sterling's death certificate, dated 8 months prior. Cause of death: suicide by overdose. A cold, suffocating despair settled over me. This wasn't just about financial ruin. This was about a life snuffed out, a man driven to the ultimate act of desperation. Serafina, or Clara Maeve, was not merely a gold digger. She was a predator. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped the folder. My son. My Ethan. He was next. Frantically, I sifted through the remaining documents, my eyes wide with terror and a desperate urgency. And there they were. Ethan's name. Recent documents, dated within the last few months. His house, the one he had worked so hard for, refinanced. And there, bold and inescapable, Clara Maeve Sterling listed as co-owner, not Serafina, but her real name, discreetly added to the property title. Next, his bank accounts. Joint accounts, with Clara Maeve Sterling, granted full withdrawal rights. It wasn't a partnership. It was an open invitation to drain him dry. And finally, the most insidious of all, life insurance policies. Substantial policies, naming Clara Maeve Sterling as the sole beneficiary. Not his mother, not his siblings, not any charity he supported, but the woman who was about to become his wife. If Arthur Sterling's fate was any indication, this was not just about money, it was about ensuring maximum profit. The sheer scope of the calculated destruction took my breath away. It was meticulously planned, ruthlessly executed. This woman was a professional. Time was running out. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the camera. Every document, every piece of evidence. I photographed methodically, ensuring clear, legible images. The marriage certificate, the photos, the bank statements, the property deeds, Arthur's death certificate, Ethan's refinanced house, the joint bank accounts, the life insurance policies. Each click of the shutter was a step toward dismantling her carefully constructed lie. Just as I was finishing, a sound from outside startled me. The distinct rumble of Serafina's luxury sedan pulling into the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. Panic flared. I quickly shoved the folder back into its hidden drawer, making sure it was completely out of sight. I smoothed the bedspread, trying to erase any trace of my intrusion. Then, I grabbed the garment bag with the emerald dress, my alibi. The front door opened, and Serafina's bright, lilting voice called out, "Eleanor? Are you here?" I walked into the living room, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Serafina, darling." Just dropped by with Clara Maeve's dress. I held up the garment bag, trying to look as nonchalant as possible. She glided towards me, her smile dazzling, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, you are such a lifesaver. Aunt Clara Maeve will be so thrilled." She took the bag from me, her fingers brushing mine. "She's just the sweetest woman, isn't she? Flew all the way from Nashville just for us." Her words, so casually delivered, were a horrifying echo of Ethan's earlier explanation. "Aunt Clara Maeve," she repeated, the lie sounding so natural, so perfectly rehearsed. But as she turned away to hang the dress, a flicker in her eyes, a fleeting moment of cold calculation, betrayed the warmth of her smile. It was the look of a predator, utterly devoid of genuine emotion, sizing up her next move. The mask was so flawlessly worn, yet I had seen behind it. And what I saw was terrifying. The air at Riverside Park was thick with the scent of damp earth and late-blooming jasmine as I approached the old oak tree. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, distorted shadows that danced with my frayed nerves. It was 10 minutes past 10, and the solitude of the park amplified the frantic pounding of my heart. Lila Sterling emerged from the deeper shadows, a slender figure clutching a large envelope. Her face, etched with worry and a profound sadness, mirrored my own turmoil. "Mrs. Vance," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. "Lila," I replied, my voice hoarse with urgency. "I found them. In Ethan's house. The marriage certificate, the bank statements, the property deeds, Arthur's death certificate, and Ethan's new refinancing, the joint accounts, the life insurance. It's all there. Everything you said. It's all true." The words tumbled out, a torrent of dread and confirmation. Lila nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding of the horror I had just unveiled. "I knew you'd find something. She's predictable, in her own twisted way." She extended a thick, overstuffed envelope towards me. "This is everything I've gathered. About Clara Maeve, her past, and what she did to Arthur." My fingers trembled as I took the envelope. Inside, a trove of documents awaited. But one photo, carefully placed at the top, immediately caught my attention. It was a picture of Arthur Sterling. My breath hitched. He was eerily similar to Ethan in his build. His earnest smile, the trusting, almost naive look in his eyes. A pang of raw terror shot through me. "She has a type," Lila said, her voice hollow. "Kind, stable, somewhat naive, men with solid assets. Easy targets." I looked up, my eyes wide with a question I was afraid to ask. "Are there others?" Lila's gaze hardened, a flicker of cold rage crossing her features. "Yes, Mrs. Vance, there are others. 3 more that I've managed to trace. Before Arthur, there was Gregory Hayes, then Jonathan Blackwood, and before them, Daniel Kim." She paused, letting the names hang in the night air like spectral warnings. All of them. Dead. Within 2 years of marrying Clara Maeve. Or, as she called herself with them, different names each time. Maya Thorne, Sophia Evans, Cassandra Lee. My world spun. 4 dead husbands. The sheer monstrosity of it was almost too much to comprehend. How did they die? I managed to ask. My throat tight. Gregory Hayes and Jonathan Blackwood were ruled suicides, Lila explained, her voice devoid of emotion, hardened by repeated recounting. Car accidents for Daniel Kim. And Arthur, as you know, an overdose. She listed them like a grim inventory, each name another nail in Clara Maeve's coffin of lies. She's meticulous. Different methods, different states, never staying long enough for anyone to connect the dots. She changes her appearance, her name, her story. She perfects the persona for each target. How did you find this out? I asked, grappling with the sheer scale of the deception. Arthur kept incredibly detailed financial records, Lila replied, her voice tinged with a painful pride in her brother's meticulousness, even in his ruin. After his death, when I was trying to make sense of what happened, I found the transfers, the property changes, the sudden shift in his life insurance. It didn't make sense, so I started digging. I followed the money, the patterns. It led me to the other victims, piece by painful piece. It took months, years even, of painstaking research. I opened Lila's envelope, and the documents inside confirmed her story. Bank statements showing the systematic draining of accounts, mirroring what I'd seen in Ethan's folder. Property transfers weeks before their deaths. Life insurance policies, totaling millions. Always naming the current alias of Clara Maeve as the sole beneficiary. It was a blueprint for financial assassination. A sophisticated, long-running scheme. A horrifying thought struck me. What about Serafina's job? Ethan said she was a teacher, but I never could quite pin down where. Lila snorted, a harsh, humorless sound. A teacher? That's rich. No, Mrs. Vance. Clara Maeve Sterling, under her real name, is a traveling pharmaceutical sales representative. A highly successful one. That explains her constant business trips, her ability to move from state to state without raising suspicion, and her extensive knowledge of various medications. My blood ran cold. Ethan had been recovering from a minor back injury a few months ago. He'd been prescribed strong painkillers, opioids. He kept them in the medicine cabinet. A staged overdose, the possibility, once abstract, now felt chillingly real. A tangible threat looming over my son. Even if she marries him, it won't be legal, will it? I asked, grasping at a sliver of hope. Bigamy? Lila shook her head, her face grim. No, the marriage itself won't be legal, but by the time anyone discovers that, she'll have already secured most of Ethan's assets through the refinancing, the joint accounts, the beneficiaries. It's a loophole she's exploited before. The marriage might be void, but the financial arrangements she puts in place beforehand are far harder to undo, especially if the target isn't around to dispute them. The implications were staggering. Clara Maeve wasn't after a legal spouse. She was after a victim, a vessel for her insatiable greed, and a means to secure a lavish lifestyle at the expense of human lives. My son was not just a future husband, he was the next mark, slated for financial ruin and, quite possibly, death. The wedding, in less than 24 hours, was not a celebration of love, but a meticulously planned execution. This story is far from over, and the danger for my son is growing with every passing hour. If you're gripped by this tale of deception and survival, make sure you don't miss what happens next. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to stay updated on how I fought to save my son. Lila Sterling's words hung in the cool night air of Riverside Park, each one a hammer blow against my fragile hope. She doesn't just marry them, Mrs. Vance, Lila began, her voice low and strained. She gets them to sign everything over to her before the marriage is even consummated, or even before the ink on the license is dry. She preyed on Arthur's protective instincts. She made him feel like her hero. Lila went on to detail the meticulous process. Ethan has transferred ownership of his house, hasn't he? To her. Jointly. I nodded numbly, recalling the property deed I'd found. And he's changed beneficiaries on his life insurance policies? His retirement accounts? Any business partnership agreements he has? She's probably pushed him to include her there too. Again, I nodded, the terrifying confirmations piling up. The life insurance, the joint accounts, the refinanced house. It was all a mirror image of Arthur's fate. She creates a pattern of making them feel like protectors, Lila explained, her voice tinged with a raw, agonizing familiarity. She engineers emergencies. A sick relative, a sudden legal issue, an unmissable business opportunity that requires immediate investment, all designed to make the man feel indispensable, to make him believe he's safeguarding her future, when in reality, he's signing away his own. My mind flashed back to a series of conversations with Ethan over the past year. Vague mentions of Serafina needing help with unexpected car repairs, a sudden issue with her student loans, even an eviction notice for a fictitious apartment she supposedly had. At the time, I'd dismissed them as unfortunate but plausible circumstances for a young woman starting fresh. Now, they were glaring red flags, meticulously planted by a master manipulator. Ethan, ever the chivalrous one, had always expressed concern, saying he was helping her get back on her feet. He saw himself as her savior. She saw him as a bank account with a pulse. The wedding, Lila continued, her voice grim, is the final step in securing her position. Once married, even if it's bigamous, she legally becomes next of kin. In the eyes of the law, especially when he's incapacitated or gone, she has automatic rights to everything not explicitly willed away. It solidifies her claim to any remaining assets, and any lingering legal questions become far more complicated to untangle. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air swept through me. I looked at Lila, my voice barely a whisper. You think she's planning to kill him soon after the wedding, don't you? Lila met my gaze, her eyes haunted. Arthur died 6 weeks after they were married, after everything was in her name, after his life insurance was firmly set, after he was utterly dependent on her. He was found with an overdose of medication, prescription painkillers she had easy access to through her job. Yes, Mrs. Vance. Your son is in immediate, grave danger. Overwhelmed, I slumped onto a nearby park bench, the weight of the revelation crushing me. He won't believe me, I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. He loves her. He's so blinded. Without irrefutable proof, he'll think I'm crazy, jealous, trying to ruin his life. Lila reached into her bag and produced a small, unassuming digital recorder. It was sleek, black, and utterly unremarkable, yet it felt like a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. I anticipated this, she said, her voice dropping to an even lower conspiratorial tone. I've been trying to get something, anything, for weeks. I managed to get this one night. I think she suspects something, but not me directly. She pressed a button, and a faint, crackling sound emerged, followed by a woman's voice, Serafina's voice, unmistakable, though hushed and distorted by distance. The recording wasn't perfectly clear, but certain phrases cut through the static, sending shivers down my spine. The sooner the better, really. This one's getting demanding. We can't risk him talking. Use the Arthur solution, but learn from our previous mistakes about the timing. Keep it clean. Don't leave any loose ends this time. The Arthur solution. Previous mistakes about timing. The phrases, vague as they were, combined with everything else I now knew, painted a horrifying picture. Serafina, calmly, dispassionately, discussing the timeline and method for my son's murder. The casualness, the cold calculation in her voice, made my stomach churn. I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea washing over me. This wasn't just a schemer. She was a remorseless killer, and my son was her next target. Who was she talking to? I managed, my voice trembling. Lila shook her head. I don't know. The voice on the other end was too muffled. But I suspect it's someone providing her with either the drugs she needs or a reliable alibi. Or maybe both. This isn't a one-woman show. Not entirely. She has help. Or at least a network. She switched off the recorder, the silence that followed even more deafening than the chilling words. Lila's eyes, full of a fierce, desperate resolve, locked onto mine. Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. If we cannot stop this wedding tomorrow, if she walks down that aisle and marries your son, Ethan is going to die. And there will be very little anyone can do to stop her from getting away with it. The night after meeting Lila was an endless, torturous loop of fear and rage. Sleep was an impossibility. I lay in the darkness, the digital recorder clutched in my hand, replaying Serafina's chilling voice over and over again. The low static, the hushed tones, the casual cruelty of her words etched themselves into my memory. The Arthur solution worked perfectly, she'd whispered, a chilling undercurrent of satisfaction in her voice, but 6 weeks was too soon. This time, I'll wait at least 3 months, maybe 4, give it time to breathe. The implications were staggering, horrifying. 3 months, maybe 4, after the wedding, my son was slated to die. The casual planning of it, the cold-blooded calculation, made my blood run cold. It was a killer's blueprint, and Ethan was the intended victim. By the first hint of dawn, a steely resolve had replaced the terror. There was no more time for fear, no more room for doubt. I couldn't wait for the wedding, couldn't risk Serafina getting one more step closer to her goal. I had to confront Ethan, now, immediately, before she could weave any further web of manipulation around him. My heart was a leaden weight in my chest, knowing the pain I was about to inflict, but the alternative was unthinkable. I dressed quickly, my movements precise and deliberate, adrenaline surging through my veins. The drive to Ethan's house felt interminable, each mile stretching into an eternity. As I pulled into his driveway, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Serafina's sleek, expensive sedan was already there, glinting in the pale morning light. My window of catching Ethan alone had closed. I took a deep breath, clutching the folder of evidence and the recorder like talismans. I raised my hand and hammered on the front door, the sound echoing hollowly in the morning quiet. It was Serafina who answered, her appearance perfectly curated even at this early hour. She was radiant, glowing in a silk robe that shimmered with effortless elegance, her hair unbound and flowing. A smile, bright and seemingly innocent, lit her face. "Eleanor, good morning, darling. What a lovely surprise. Ethan's just making coffee. Come in, come in." Her words, her demeanor, were a performance of flawless charm, designed to disarm. But I saw through it now. Behind the dazzling smile, in the depths of her eyes, I glimpsed a fleeting flicker of something colder, something predatory. The mask was impeccable, but I knew what lay beneath. "I need to speak to Ethan," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of any pleasantries. Privately, Serafina's smile faltered, a subtle shift, barely perceptible to anyone who didn't know her true nature. "Oh, is everything all right? You seem a little distressed. Of course, you can talk to Ethan, but why don't you both sit down, and I'll bring you a cup of coffee." Her tone was laced with feigned concern, a masterful display of innocent helpfulness. "Now, Serafina," I insisted, my voice firm. "It's important." Just then, Ethan appeared, drawn by the sound of our voices. He looked happy, genuinely content, his hair tousled, a faint smile on his face. He held a mug of coffee, steam curling gently upwards. Seeing him so oblivious, so completely vulnerable, sent a fresh wave of agony through me, but it also solidified my resolve. "Mom? What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Everything okay?" "No, Ethan," I said, my voice breaking slightly, but I forced myself to push through the pain. "Everything is not okay. This woman, Serafina," I gestured toward her, ignoring her sharp intake of breath, "is already married. She has been for 3 years. The bomb dropped. Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a dawning anger. Serafina, for her part, was a master of her craft. Her eyes welled up with perfect tears, her lower lip trembled, and she gasped as if genuinely wounded. Eleanor, how could you say such a thing? What is this all about? Are you trying to ruin our wedding? Her voice was laced with a heartbreaking indignation, a performance worthy of an Oscar. It's not a lie, Ethan, I countered, pulling out the marriage certificate. I thrust it into his hands. Her real name is Clara Maeve Sterling. She married Arthur Sterling 3 years ago in Georgia. I pointed to the small, grainy photo attached to the certificate. Look closely, Ethan. It's her, despite the different hair color. It's Serafina. Ethan stared at the document, his face paling, but he quickly shook his head, denial etched onto his features. This is fake, Mom. Someone's trying to sabotage us. Serafina. Tell her. Serafina, regaining her composure, stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Ethan's arm, her tears still flowing gracefully. Ethan, darling, this is ludicrous. Your mother must have been misled. Or perhaps she's just stressed about the wedding. Stressed? I scoffed, my voice rising with indignation. Stressed about you destroying my son? Just like you destroyed Arthur Sterling? I pulled out the next set of documents, spreading them on the coffee table. These are bank records, Ethan, from Arthur Sterling's accounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Systematically transferred to Clara Maeve Sterling. Property deeds. Transferred weeks before he died. My voice cracked. Arthur Sterling, Ethan, her first husband, died by suicide by overdose, 6 months after she left him penniless. Ethan reeled back, visibly shaken, his face a mask of horror. Serafina's perfect tears flowed more freely, her denials more impassioned. Lies, all lies. This is slander, Eleanor. I don't know who this Arthur is. You know him. Clara Maeve? I spat, using her real name, watching a flicker of genuine fear cross her face. You know him, just as you knew Gregory Hayes, Jonathan Blackwood, and Daniel Kim. I watched her face, the subtle widening of her eyes, the momentary paralysis. 4 other men, Ethan. 4 other marriages, 4 other deaths. She's a killer, a black widow who preys on unsuspecting men. Ethan's face was contorted with rage, not at Serafina, but at me. Stop it, Mom. You're insane. You're making this up. He started towards me, his eyes blazing. You want me to stop, Ethan? I cried, my voice raw with anguish. I quickly found the recording on the digital device. Then listen to this. Listen to what your darling fiancé was planning for you. I pressed play, and Serafina's hushed, casual voice filled the room, talking about the Arthur solution, about learning from previous mistakes, about timing, about waiting at least 3 months, maybe 4 after the wedding. Her own words, chillingly calm, planning my son's murder. The small digital recorder clicked off, plunging the living room into a suffocating silence. Serafina's chilling words, planning Ethan's death, hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The perfect tears instantly vanished from her eyes. The mask, so meticulously crafted and worn, finally shattered, revealing a cold, calculating expression, utterly devoid of warmth or remorse. You have no idea what you've done, Eleanor, Serafina said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual melodic charm, now sharp and deadly. The chilling admission of guilt, so casually delivered, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Ethan stood frozen, his face a mask of utter devastation, his eyes fixed on Serafina. The recording had ripped away his carefully constructed reality, leaving him exposed to a monstrous truth. Serafina, he whispered, his voice broken. The house, the bank accounts, the insurance. The full scope of her betrayal, of the financial web she had spun around him, crashed down. Serafina merely shrugged, a subtle, dismissive gesture. Arthur was married, she stated, her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Now he's dead, so technically I'm a widow. It's a clean slate, and yes, darling, she turned her gaze, cold and direct, to Ethan. It was all for us, our future. A pause, then a chilling addendum. a flicker of something almost akin to affection in her eyes. Eventually, though I was going to wait longer this time, 3 months, maybe 4. I really do care about you, Ethan. More than the others. The casual confession, the implied hierarchy of her victims, was truly sickening. My mind raced. Ethan was clearly in shock, paralyzed by the horror of it all. I had to act. My hand instinctively reached for my phone, intent on calling the police, but before I could even unlock it, a figure emerged from the hallway. A man in a paramedic's uniform, carrying a medical bag. His presence was sudden, unnerving. This was the accomplice, Kenneth Thorne. He held a syringe, glinting ominously under the morning light. "It seems we have a slight change of plans," Kenneth said, his voice calm, professional, yet utterly devoid of empathy. 2 overdoses in one house, a tragic tale of a mother and son, overcome with wedding stress. The official story will be that Eleanor, in a fit of delusion, attacked Serafina. Ethan, attempting to intervene, was caught in the crossfire. Then, a murder-suicide. He smiled, a cold, empty gesture. Very neat, very believable. Panic clawed at my throat. They were going to kill us both. My son, and me, his mother. Silenced forever. I had to fight. "You won't get away with this," I cried, my voice raw with desperation. "Lila Sterling knows everything. She has copies of all your documents, all your victims. She's given them to the police." It was a desperate bluff, but I hoped it would buy us time. Serafina let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that held no humor. "Lila Sterling?" she sneered. "Oh, Eleanor dear. Lila Sterling died in a tragic car accident 3 days ago, just before her flight to Georgia, I believe. Such tragic timing, really. She was so close to uncovering everything." Her eyes glittered with malicious triumph. My blood ran cold. Lila had been murdered. 3 days ago, just before our call. She had called me from beyond the grave, a final, desperate act of justice for her brother. The realization that we were truly alone, truly cornered, snapped me out of my paralyzing fear. There was no more time for pleas or explanations. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw myself forward, lunging for the coffee table where I had carelessly left my phone. My fingers scrambled for it. Finding the screen, I hit the emergency button, the only option readily available. "Help!" I screamed into the phone, my voice hoarse, adrenaline coursing through me. "They're trying to kill us. Clara Maeve Sterling is a murderer. She killed Lila Sterling too." Kenneth, startled by my sudden movement, lunged towards me. But Ethan, finally galvanized into action, tackled him. The paramedic, caught off guard, stumbled, and the syringe flew from his hand, skittering across the polished floor. At that precise moment, a distant, wailing siren cut through the morning air, growing rapidly louder. Officer Ramirez, a familiar face from the local precinct who knew my son, had received the emergency call. Hope, fierce and blinding, surged through me. Serafina, her composure finally cracking, her face contorted with pure, unadulterated fury, snatched a decorative carving knife from a nearby mantelpiece. The blade glinted dangerously. "You foolish old woman!" she shrieked, her voice stripped bare of its charm, revealing the venomous rage beneath. "You think you can stop me? I've been doing this since I was 18. 12 victims, 12 fools. I built an empire, Eleanor. Millions. And you think you can take that away from me?" Her face was a mask of pure madness, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying, unhinged ambition. She was not just a schemer. She was a serial killer, a black widow who had left a trail of broken lives and empty bank accounts across the country. And now, she was cornered. The blare of the siren grew deafening, followed by the screech of tires as a patrol car skidded to a halt in the driveway. Moments later, the front door burst open, and uniformed officers flooded into the house, their weapons drawn. Officer Ramirez, recognizing me immediately, rushed forward. "She's a murderer!" I gasped, pointing a trembling finger at Serafina, who still clutched the knife, her eyes wild with rage. She tried to kill us. Her real name is Clara Maeve Sterling. She killed 4 other men, Officer, and Lila Sterling. Ethan, still grappling with Kenneth, cried out, "She's got a knife." The officers quickly apprehended Kenneth Thorne, disarming him and securing him with handcuffs. Serafina, despite her fury, knew the game was up. She slowly lowered the knife, her eyes still blazing with a cold, malevolent hatred as an officer moved in to cuff her. As they led her away, Serafina glared at me, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "You have no idea what you've cost me, old woman." My gaze met hers, steady and defiant. "Oh, I know exactly what I've cost you, Clara Maeve," I retorted, my voice ringing with righteous anger. "I've cost you my son's life, and for that, there is no price you could ever pay." Detective Davies, a seasoned investigator from the Major Crimes Unit, arrived shortly after, taking our statements. As I recounted the horrifying tale, presenting the evidence I had meticulously collected and the chilling recording from Leela, his expression grew increasingly grim. "Mrs. Vance," he said, shaking his head in disbelief, "if everything you've presented holds up, and it looks like it will, this could be one of the largest serial murder cases we've seen in decades. The level of planning, the sheer number of victims, it's staggering." The legal process that followed was agonizingly slow but ultimately triumphant, because Clara Maeve Sterling's marriage to Ethan was bigamous and obtained through egregious fraud. All the financial transactions she had orchestrated, the refinancing of Ethan's house, the joint bank accounts, the life insurance policies, were deemed null and void. Ethan's assets, thankfully, could largely be recovered. The relief was immense, but the emotional scars ran deep. 6 months later, Ethan and I sat in the packed courtroom, watching as Clara Maeve Sterling, stripped of her glamorous facade, her real name now widely known as Clara Lynn Stevens, was sentenced. The judge's voice, firm and unwavering, echoed through the hushed room. Life without parole for 12 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated financial fraud, and bigamy. Kenneth Thorne, who had cooperated with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence, received 25 years for his role as an accomplice. His testimony was crucial in connecting Clara to the pattern of deaths and securing convictions. Victim impact statements from the families of Gregory Hayes, Jonathan Blackwood, and Daniel Kim painted a harrowing picture of Clara Sterling's manipulation, the isolation, the systematic financial draining, and ultimately, the cold-blooded murder of their loved ones. Each story was a painful echo of what almost happened to Ethan. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium, my heart pounding, but my voice was strong. "Clara Lynn Stevens," I began, my gaze sweeping over her impassive face. "You tried to take the most precious thing in my life, my son. You took his trust, his generosity, his love, and you perverted those beautiful qualities into tools for murder, but you failed. My son is alive. And you will spend the rest of your life paying for your crimes." I saw a flicker of something in her eyes then. Not remorse, but perhaps a grudging recognition of my victory. The aftermath was a long, arduous journey of healing. Ethan struggled profoundly with the guilt and shame of having been so thoroughly deceived. He began seeing Dr. Monroe, a therapist who specialized in helping victims of psychopaths to process the emotional trauma and rebuild his shattered trust. It was a slow, painful process, but with each session, he took another step towards reclaiming himself. One of the most profound acts of healing for us was a new ritual. Every Sunday, Ethan and I would visit the quiet, sun-dappled graves of Lila Sterling and Arthur Sterling, placing fresh flowers. We spoke of their bravery, their sacrifices, and the justice that, however belated, had finally been served. Lila, in her desperate pursuit of justice for her brother, had saved my son's life, and for that, we would be eternally grateful. The investigation into Clara Lynn Stevens revealed a bleak childhood spent in foster care, a desolate landscape that had, tragically, taught her early on that relationships were purely transactional, a means to an end. It was a chilling glimpse into the making of a monster. but it offered no absolution for the devastation she had wrought. Over time, Ethan recovered his assets, but more importantly, he recovered his ability to trust himself, to trust his instincts again. He started rebuilding his life, cautiously venturing into new relationships and business opportunities, but with a newfound wisdom and discernment. Our Sunday dinners, once a casual tradition, became a sacred ritual, a celebration of family, survival, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. The shadow of Clara Lynn Stevens would always be a part of our story, but it no longer defined us. We had survived, and we were stronger for it.